The future has arrived, or at least a ray-traced version of it. With RTX graphics cards now available in both desktops and laptops, even mobile users can grab the power of Turing and game on the go. Friend of the channel, Electronics, sent over their latest, a 17-inch 1080p gaming laptop with an RTX 2060 inside. And today we're going to find out if it's actually worth all the hype. Looking to supercharge your 1080p gaming experience? Look no further than the RX 580 Red Dragon from Parole. With 8GB of VRAM, a lightweight and compact cooler design, and an all-black aesthetic with backplate, the RX 580 is the perfect choice to pair with a high refresh rate FreeSync monitor. Between February 25th and March 3rd, pick up the 580 Red Dragon for a crazy low $169.99, and you'll also get the AMD Raise the Game bundle with your choice of 2 AAA titles along with it, a $100 value. Check out the link in the video description to learn more. So this is the Electronics Mech 17 G1R, and it's available in 3 different GPU configurations. If you're okay rocking a GTX 1060, you can pick up a Mech 17 with 16 gigs of RAM and a 512 gig M.2 SSD for around $1,400. Carrying over from last year, you still get the excellent Intel i7-8750H 6-core processor and matte finish 144Hz IPS screen. It will be a capable machine for most tasks for a long time to come, but if you're mainly buying this as an on-the-go gaming device, you might at this point be looking for a little more oomph on the GPU side. For a $100 upcharge, you can swap out that old and busted GTX 1060 for a shiny new RTX 2060, or for $300, you can go all the way up to a 2070. I actually asked Electronics if they could send over both versions so I can test them side by side, but the only loaners they had at the time were of the 2060 variety, and well, beggars can't be choosers. Still though, when I was doing my comprehensive testing of 4 different RTX 2060 desktop cards, I was thoroughly impressed by their 1080p and 1440p gaming chops. And overall, it's a much more powerful solution than even the GTX 1070. In fact, in some cases, it was standing shoulder to shoulder with a GTX 1080. And getting that kind of power into a fairly thin and fairly light gaming laptop for $1,500 seems like a crazy deal. Even a few months ago, GTX 1080 equipped laptops were regularly going for upwards of $2,500 and were awkward, heavy behemoths. So if Turing can allow us the same performance in a much smaller package for a very reasonable price, that seems like a win all around. I'm not going to go over this laptop in any great detail because this video is more about the relative performance of the new RTX 2060 mobile chip than the laptop chassis. But for those of you wondering, I actually like this construction quite a bit more than their Mech 15 G2 that I reviewed last year and took with me to CES to edit with. The 17-inch version has a redesigned keyboard layout and brown mechanical switches with angled corners, making them easier to differentiate by feel than on the 15-inch model. The layout also feels better spaced out than before, although I'm still not a fan of a number pad being so close to my main keys. As with last year's models, the standout feature of the Mech lineup is the screen. The IPS 144Hz panel looks gorgeous with bright colors, good viewing angles, and of course, high refresh rate. I ran the Mech 17 and the RTX 2060 through several different gaming benchmarks at 1080p, with the exception of TimeSpy, which is native to 1440p. The 2060 will be competing today against my 2018 Razer Blade with a GTX 1070 Max Q and also a desktop RTX 2060 card from MSI. Granted, the desktop GPU will have an advantage as it's paired with a 9900K as opposed to an 8750H like the others, but we'll have to roll with it. So is the RTX 2060 mobile version actually just the desktop version in disguise? Here are our results. I was actually a little disappointed by our results. Not that they were necessarily bad. In fact, the RTX 2060 outperformed the 1070 Max-Q in almost every test, aside from a couple where they were about even. Some results like TimeSpy, the 2060 was significantly ahead. Still though, neither of them managed to come close to the results from our desktop 2060, so the dream of experiencing GTX 1080 levels of performance in a mobile package seems to be on hold, at least until I get my hands on a 2070 equipped laptop. But maybe something that's even more important than these numbers that I just showed you is the fact that this laptop has what this one doesn't. And that's RT and Tensor cores, giving it the ability to utilize not only DXR features, but also DLSS, or Deep Learning Supersampling. With a graphics processor of this class, I'd argue that DLSS is even more important than it is with something like a 2080 or 2080 Ti. DLSS will allow us to run games at higher fidelity settings without compromising frame rate, or at least that's the idea. This is especially important because we have a high refresh rate screen, and obviously we'd like to take advantage of that if at all possible. So I loaded up Metro Exodus, and here's what I found. So this is the beginning of, I guess, the prologue, and this is not the most demanding area of the game, but it should at least give us kind of an idea of how the game is running. And right now with those settings that we showed you before, we are in the 80s, 70s and 80s with good frame times as well. And no complaints so far. The game looks pretty good. Does not look quite as good as if we had DLSS off, but no complaints, especially if we're running in a decent frame rate on a laptop. So maybe DLSS is actually doing some work here. I think the major difference that we're going to see between this card that's in here and the desktop version is just going to be the clock speed at which it runs. I mean, you could see up in the left-hand corner, the megahertz rating is actually the GPU speed. So we're only running below 1500 megahertz, which is compared to the desktop version quite a bit lower. The desktop version was regularly running around 1900 megahertz. So likely it's just a downclocked version because this is not a Max-Q version of the 2060. It's actually just marketed as an RTX 2060. So it's likely that it's just downclocked to fit within the thermal restraints, or thermal limits of something like the like a laptop chassis. Got him. Suck it, beast thing. So yeah, so now this is a little more demanding of an area, and we are running in the 50s. So it might be that we have to adjust some quality settings in order to get it to run above 60 FPS regularly. Especially if we want to use ray tracing features. But to be honest, because DXR features are right now so young, it's understandable that perhaps their implementation is not quite optimized, and we're seeing results like this, or like we saw in Battlefield 5. Where you're not getting the best performance, and it's still developing, and it seems like every release of the game, every release of new drivers from NVIDIA actually brings significantly improved performance, just because they're tweaking things along the way. So the fact that we can actually use these features in a laptop right now is actually pretty impressive, and I don't know, kind of happy to see it. So yeah, this is kind of like a in-game rendered cutscene almost. So it's going to be running a little bit higher in the 90s. But generally, we were in the 60s and 70s, kind of dipping down into the 50s there temporarily, which is pretty good, and I'm honestly pretty happy with. Given that this GPU runs significantly slower than the desktop variant, I thought it was worth it to see if we can overclock and make up at least some of that difference. Through trial and error, I was able to get up to plus 175 on the GPU core before encountering instability and crashes, but this still didn't result in a clock speed much in excess of 1500 MHz. Of course, performance was increased over stock, but so too was fan noise, so you know. Overall, the Laptop 2060 is clearly inferior to the desktop version, but that likely comes down strictly to those clock speeds. While the mobile chip is capped somewhere around, I guess 1500 MHz even after overclocking, at least in this chassis, the desktop version can get up over 2000. That alone is enough to explain the performance gap. Even with the disparity, gaming with ray tracing enabled is a thing that you can certainly do, albeit with the help of DLSS. If you're looking at buying a gaming laptop in early 2019, I don't think it makes much sense to look at the 1060 or 1070 versions anymore unless it's some crazy discount. The RTX 2060 is a better performer and will allow you to enable more RTX features as they become more widely available and implemented. The downgrade in VRAM to 6GB hardly matters at 1080p right now, so don't let that be a deterrent. If we were dealing with 1440p or 4K resolutions, that would be another story entirely. So what do you guys think of the RTX 2060 laptop variant? Sound off in the comments section down below. Also, don't forget to get subscribed to the channel if you're not already. Check out the merch store at bpscustoms.com. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.